The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Noah Armitage stepped into the marble foyer of his Pacific Heights townhouse, a box of lily-shaped cookies balanced carefully in one hand, his travel bag slung over his shoulder. He'd cut his business trip short by 2 days. Something had been gnawing at him, an inexplicable urgency to get home to his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The house felt different, too quiet. The usual sounds of afternoon cartoons or Lily's delighted giggles were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness that made the hair on his neck stand up. Then he heard it, a faint whimper from upstairs followed by a sharp crash. Noah's blood turned to ice as he dropped his bag and took the stairs 3 at a time. What he discovered when he rounded the corner to Lily's room would destroy everything he thought he knew about his family and set in motion a chain of events that would test every fiber of his being as a father. Before I tell you this story that will leave you questioning everything about trust family and the masks people wear, please comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The cookie box hit the marble floor with a hollow thud that seemed to echo through the entire house, its cheerful yellow ribbon unraveling as lily-shaped treats scattered across the pristine white surface. Noah Armitage stood frozen in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, his mind struggling to process the scene before him. His wife Celine standing over 6-year-old Lily, who lay crumpled on the floor beside her, overturned wheelchair, her small body trembling as she tried to reach for the crutches that had been kicked just out of her grasp. "Daddy!" Lily's voice cracked with relief and terror as she spotted him, her dark eyes wide with tears that she'd clearly been holding back. The specialized orthotic braces on her legs caught the afternoon light streaming through the window, a stark reminder of the cerebral palsy that made her so vulnerable, so dependent on the very people who should protect her. Celine spun around her perfectly styled blonde hair, whipping across her shoulders, her expression shifting from something cold and calculating to surprised innocence in the span of a heartbeat. "Noah, you're home early." Her voice carried that practiced tone he'd heard her use with investors and board members, smooth, controlled deflecting. Lily just took a little tumble. She was being stubborn about her physical therapy exercises. But Noah's eyes weren't on his wife. They were locked on his daughter, taking in the fresh bruise blooming purple along her left temple. The way she instinctively flinched when Celine took a step closer. The tear tracks on her cheeks that told a story her 6-year-old vocabulary couldn't fully articulate. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. The successful fintech entrepreneur, the man who'd built an empire from algorithms and ambition, became nothing more than a father whose child was in danger. "Don't," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warning that made Celine freeze mid-step. "Don't come any closer to her." Noah moved with careful deliberation, kneeling beside Lily and gathering her into his arms with the practiced gentleness of someone who'd helped her through countless physical therapy sessions, medical appointments, and midnight fears. She melted against him, her small fingers clutching his shirt with desperate relief. "I didn't want you to be mad," Lily whispered against his neck, her words barely audible, but hitting him like a physical blow. "I tried to do the exercises right, Daddy. I really tried." The implications of those words, the terrible understanding that his daughter had been protecting him from something that she'd been suffering in silence, sent a wave of rage through Noah, so pure and hot that he had to close his eyes and count to 10 to keep from saying something that couldn't be taken back. "You're not in trouble, baby girl," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all." Celine's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Really, Noah, you're being dramatic. Children fall. It's what they do. Lily's she's more fragile than other kids, and she gets emotional when she can't keep up with her exercises. I was helping her understand that she needs to try harder. Helping her? Noah's voice was dangerously quiet as he stood Lily still in his arms. Is that what you call knocking away a disabled child's mobility aids? I didn't. Celine started, but her protest died as Noah's gaze shifted to something over her shoulder. There, mounted discreetly in the corner of the room, was the small security camera he'd installed months ago. The red recording light blinked steadily, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, Celine's composed mask slipped entirely. The cameras, she breathed, her face going pale. Noah, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. His voice was steel wrapped in silk, the tone he used in boardrooms when someone had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I need you to leave this room. Now. This is my house too. Leave the room. Each word was enunciated with crystalline clarity, and something in his expression must have penetrated, because Celine took a step back, then another. We'll talk about this, she said, trying to regain her composure. When you've calmed down and can think rationally. Celine. The single word stopped her retreat. If you're not out of this house in the next hour, I'm calling the police. The silence that followed was deafening. Celine's mouth opened and closed twice before she turned and stalked from the room, her designer heels clicking sharply against the hard wood floor. Noah waited until he heard the master bedroom door slam, before gently settling Lily back onto her bed, careful not to jar her injured leg. Daddy. Lily's voice was small, uncertain. Are you going to send me away? The question hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. What baby, no. Never. Why would you think that? Celine said. She said if I told you about the falling down, you might send me to live with the doctors again. Like when I was little before you came and got me. Noah's vision blurred with rage and grief. Lily's early years had been spent in a series of foster homes and medical facilities before he'd finally been able to adopt her 2 years ago. The fact that Celine would use that trauma, that abandonment, as a weapon against a child made his hands shake with the effort to remain calm. Listen to me, Lily. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing himself to speak slowly, clearly. You are my daughter. You are home. Nobody is ever going to take you away from me, and I am never going to leave you. Do you understand? She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I was scared to tell you. She said it would make you sad, and you work so hard already. Oh, sweetheart. Noah pulled her close again, his heart breaking for this brave little girl who'd been trying to protect him from her own pain. It's not your job to take care of me. It's my job to take care of you. And I should have seen. But he had seen, hadn't he? The subtle changes in Lily's behavior over the past few months. The way she'd become quieter when Celine was around, more anxious about his business trips. The unexplained bruises that Celine had explained away with stories about playground accidents and clumsy falls. He'd wanted to believe those explanations because believing them was easier than confronting the alternative. I need to call Dr. Martinez, he said, finally reaching for his phone. Just to make sure you're okay, and then we're going to figure out how to make sure you're always safe. As he dialed their pediatrician's number, Noah caught sight of movement in the hallway. Jonah Lee, the 16-year-old from next door, who sometimes helped with yard work, was standing near the top of the stairs, his face pale with shock. In his hand was his phone, the camera app open. Their eyes met through the doorway, and Noah saw the guilt and confusion written across the teenager's face. How much had he seen? How long had he known Mr. Armitage? Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through the phone, pulling Noah's attention back to the immediate crisis. How can I help you? I need to bring Lily in. Noah said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his head. There's been an incident, and I need to document. I need medical records of any injuries. Of course. Can you be here in 30 minutes? We'll be there in 20. As Noah gathered Lily's medical bag and helped her into her wheelchair, he made mental notes of everything that needed to happen. Doctor's visit, police report, lawyer consultation, security footage review. Each task felt simultaneously urgent and surreal, as if he were planning the dismantling of his own life with the same methodical precision he brought to business deals. "Daddy!" Lily's voice was stronger now, more like her usual self. What's going to happen to Celine? It was such a simple question, delivered with the innocent directness that only children possessed. What was going to happen to the woman he'd married? The woman who'd promised to love and protect his daughter? The woman who'd been systematically abusing a disabled child? "I don't know yet, baby," he said honestly. "But whatever happens, it's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to worry about it. Your only job is to be 6 years old and let the grown-ups handle the grown-up problems." As they made their way downstairs, Noah could hear Celine moving around in the master bedroom drawers, slamming hangers, clattering the sound of someone packing in angry haste. Good. Let her leave on her own terms, while she still could. The lily-shaped cookies were still scattered across the foyer floor, their cheerful yellow frosting now seeming grotesquely inappropriate. Noah had bought them at a little bakery in Portland, thinking they would make Lily smile after 3 days of missing her daddy. Instead, they'd become the backdrop for the moment his marriage imploded and his real life as a single father began. "Can we still eat the cookies?" Lily asked as they passed the mess. Even though they're on the floor, Noah looked down at his daughter, this resilient, brave little girl who could find hope in scattered cookies after being hurt by someone who should have protected her, and felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but expanding, making room for a fiercer kind of love, a more vigilant kind of protection. "We'll get new cookies," he promised. "Better cookies. As many cookies as you want. Can they still be lily-shaped?" "They can be any shape you want, sweetheart. Lily-shaped, star-shaped, dinosaur-shaped, whatever makes you happy." As Noah loaded Lily into his Tesla and backed out of the driveway, he caught a glimpse of Jonah Lee standing at his bedroom window, phone still in his hand. The teenager raised one hand, in what might have been a wave or an apology. Noah couldn't tell which. But as they drove toward the medical center, Noah found himself thinking about that phone, about what might be stored in its memory, and whether a 16-year-old boy might hold the key to ensuring that justice was served. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as they wound through traffic, and Noah realized that despite everything, the abuse, the betrayal, the legal battles that lay ahead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: clarity. For the first time since marrying Celine, he knew exactly what his priorities were, and exactly what he needed to do. Protect Lily. Document everything. Make sure this never happened again. Everything else was just details. "Daddy!" Lily's voice drifted from the back seat where she was buckled into her specialized car seat. "I love you." "I love you too, baby girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion, more than all the stars in the sky. That's a lot of love. That's exactly right. That's a lot of love. As they pulled into the medical center parking lot, Noah's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen and saw Celine's name along with a preview of words that made his blood run cold. "If you think you can destroy my reputation over a misunderstanding." He deleted the message without reading the rest and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Whatever threats or manipulations Celine had planned, whatever legal or personal weapons she thought she could deploy, she'd miscalculated one crucial factor. She wasn't dealing with a businessman anymore. She was dealing with a father whose child had been hurt, and that made him infinitely more dangerous than she could possibly imagine. The automatic doors of the medical center slid open with a soft whoosh, and Noah pushed Lily's wheelchair into the sterile brightness of the lobby. Behind them, the sun was setting over Pacific Heights, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, Noah thought distantly. It was also the last sunset of the life he'd thought he was living. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, all that mattered was making sure his daughter was safe, documenting her injuries, and beginning the process of building a case that would ensure Celine could never hurt her again. "Mr. Armitage." A nurse appeared beside them, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Martinez is ready for you." As they followed the nurse down the familiar hallway toward the examination rooms, Noah made a silent promise to the little girl beside him. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would make this right. He would protect her, he would love her, and he would never ever let anyone hurt her again. The examination room door closed behind them, with a soft click, sealing them into a space that felt both safe and profoundly sad. Outside, the world continued its normal rhythm. Traffic hummed along the streets. Families sat down to dinner. Children played in backyards. But inside this small room, a father and daughter began the difficult work of healing from betrayal and building a future based on truth instead of carefully maintained lies. It was a beginning, Noah realized. Not the beginning he'd planned or wanted, but a beginning nonetheless. And sometimes, that was enough. Dr. Martinez's gentle hands moved carefully over Lily's small frame, documenting each bruise with the clinical precision of someone who'd seen too many cases like this. The examination room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows that made the purple marks on Lily's temple and ribs look even more pronounced against her pale skin. Noah sat in the corner chair, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had gone white, watching as his daughter's injuries were photographed and measured with the methodical care of building evidence. "The bruising pattern here," Dr. Martinez said softly, indicating the marks on Lily's rib cage, "is consistent with pressure from fingers. And this one on her shoulder." She paused, meeting Noah's eyes with a look that confirmed his worst fears. "These aren't from falls, Noah." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Noah had known, of course, but hearing it from a medical professional made it real in a way that twisted his stomach into knots. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the various stages of healing I'm seeing, I'd estimate this has been going on for at least 6 weeks, possibly longer." Dr. Martinez's voice was steady, professional, but Noah caught the tremor of anger beneath her words. "I'm required by law to file a report with Child Protective Services. I assume you're planning to involve law enforcement." "Already on my list," Noah said grimly. "What else do I need to know?" Before Dr. Martinez could answer, Noah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Celine's name flashed on the screen, and he declined it without hesitation. Then it buzzed again, and again. "Daddy, is Celine mad at us?" Lily asked from the examination table, her voice small and worried. "Celine's feelings are not your responsibility, sweetheart," Noah said firmly, turning his phone to silent. "Dr. Martinez, what's the next step?" "I want to do a full psychological evaluation with Dr. Priya Rao," she said, pulling up contacts on her tablet. "She specializes in trauma cases involving children with disabilities. Lily's going to need support processing this, especially given her history with the foster system." As Dr. Martinez made the call, Noah's mind raced through the logistics of what came next. He needed to contact his lawyer, review the security footage, figure out how to handle his business obligations while prioritizing Lily's needs. But first, he needed to make sure they had somewhere safe to stay tonight. "Mr. Armitage." A new voice interrupted his planning. A woman in her early 30s stood in the doorway, her badge identifying her as Sergeant Elena Brooks from the Family Protection Unit. Dr. Martinez called ahead. I'd like to speak with you about filing a formal report. The next hour passed in a blur of official questions and careful documentation. Sergeant Brooks took detailed notes as Noah recounted the scene he'd witnessed, his voice steady, despite the rage that simmered beneath the surface. When she asked to speak with Lily, Noah positioned himself where his daughter could see him, offering silent support as she answered questions in her brave, matter-of-fact way. She would get angry when I couldn't do the exercises fast enough. Lily explained, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. She said Daddy worked too hard to have a daughter who didn't try. So I tried to be better, but sometimes my legs don't work the way I want them to. Brooks's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Did she ever tell you not to tell your daddy about being hurt? Lily nodded solemnly. She said it would make him sad, and that maybe he would decide I was too much trouble, like the other families did before Daddy adopted me. The casual way Lily delivered this devastating information made Noah's vision blur with fury. To use a child's deepest fears against them to weaponize their trauma, it was evil in its calculated cruelty. Thank you for being so brave and telling the truth, Brooks said gently. Is there anything else you think I should know? Lily was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. Sometimes Jonah from next door would look worried when he saw me in the yard. He asked me once if everything was okay at home, but I said yes because Celine told me to always say yes. Brooks made another note. We'll need to speak with Jonah as well. Children often see things adults miss. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Noah's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. He glanced at it and felt his pulse quicken. Mr. Armitage, this is Jonah Lee. I need to talk to you about what I saw today. I have something you need to see. Noah showed the message to Brooks, who raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing. I'd like to be present when you speak with him. Of course. Noah typed back quickly. Can you meet us at the police station in an hour? The response came immediately. Yes. And Mr. Armitage, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. They finished at the medical center as darkness fell over the city. Noah carried Lily to the car. Her small body relaxed against his chest in a way that told him she felt safer than she had in months. The simple act of being believed, of having adults take her seriously and protect her, had already begun to ease some of the tension she'd been carrying. Are we going home? She asked, as Noah buckled her into her car seat. Not tonight, baby. We're going to stay at a hotel for a few days while some grown-up things get sorted out. Like a vacation. Something like that. Noah's phone buzzed again, another call from Celine. This time he answered. What? His voice was ice cold. Noah, thank God. We need to talk. I know how this looks, but you're misunderstanding the situation. Lily she's a challenging child, and sometimes she needs firm boundaries. I was trying to help her build character. Stop talking. The command cut through her words like a blade. Just stop. I've seen the medical reports, Celine. I've spoken to the police. You have exactly one chance to make this easier on everyone involved. You're threatening me. I'm giving you an opportunity to take responsibility for what you've done, to admit to hurting a disabled child and seek help. Celine's laugh was sharp, bitter. You think I'm going to confess to child abuse? Noah, you're delusional. That little girl has been manipulating you since the day you adopted her. She plays the victim because she knows it gets her attention. And now she's got you so twisted around her finger that you're willing to destroy our marriage over her lies. The words hit Noah like physical blows. The calculated cruelty of referring to Lily as that little girl, the complete absence of remorse or accountability, it crystallized something in his mind. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of lost temper. This was who Celine really was. Our marriage is already destroyed, he said quietly. You destroyed it the moment you laid hands on my daughter. Don't contact us again. Any communication goes through lawyers from now on." He ended the call and immediately blocked her number. As they drove toward the police station, Lily dozed in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Noah found himself thinking about the red flags he'd missed, or ignored Celine's insistence on handling all of Lily's care during his business trips, her subtle criticisms of Lily's progress in physical therapy, the way she'd gradually isolated them from friends and extended family. The police station was a stark institutional building that smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Brooks met them at the front desk and led them to a small conference room where Jonah Lee was already waiting, looking young and nervous in his rumpled school clothes. "Mr. Armitage." Jonah stood as they entered, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm really sorry about everything. I should have said something sooner." "You're here now," Noah said simply. "That's what matters." Brooks activated a recording device and nodded to Jonah. "Tell us what you witnessed today." Jonah's hands shook slightly as he pulled out his phone. "I was in my room doing homework when I heard shouting from your house. It's not the first time, but today it sounded different, worse. So I looked out my window and saw into Lily's room." He scrolled through his phone's camera roll and found a video file. "I started recording because I thought maybe I should have proof in case something bad happened." The video was shaky, shot through a window from about 30 feet away, but the audio was clear enough. Celine's voice came through the phone speaker, sharp and vicious. "Stop crying. Your father doesn't want to hear about your problems when he gets home. He works 16-hour days to pay for your doctors and your special equipment, and all you do is complain and make excuses." Then came Lily's small voice, barely audible. "I'm trying, Celine. My legs hurt today. I don't want to hear it." The sound of something clattering, Lily's crutch hitting the floor. "Maybe if you spent less time feeling sorry for yourself and more time working hard, you'd make some progress." Noah's hands clenched into fists as he watched the grainy video. Even from a distance, he could see Lily trying to reach her fallen crutch, could see Celine deliberately kicking it further away. "I kept recording." Jonah continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But then I saw your car in the driveway, and I got scared. I didn't know what to do." Brooks leaned forward. "Is this the first time you witnessed something like this?" Jonah shook his head miserably. "No. I've been hearing things for weeks, shouting, crying. Sometimes I'd see Lily in the backyard, and she'd have new bruises, but she'd always make up stories about falling or bumping into things. I wanted to tell someone, but I wasn't sure, and Celine always seemed so nice when other people were around." "Did you ever try to talk to Lily directly?" "Once, about 2 weeks ago. I asked if everything was okay at home, and she got this scared look and said everything was fine. But I could tell she was lying." Jonah looked directly at Noah. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you then. I was scared I was wrong, and I didn't want to cause trouble if it was just normal family stuff." Noah felt a mix of gratitude and heartbreak for this teenager who'd been carrying the weight of suspicion and fear. "You did the right thing by speaking up now. Do you have the video saved somewhere safe?" "I uploaded it to my cloud storage, and I have the metadata that shows when and where it was taken." Jonah's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "I also have photos from other times when I saw Lily looking hurt or scared." Brooks made notes on everything, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. "Jonah, we're going to need you to make a formal statement. Is your parent or guardian available to be present for that?" "My mom's at work, but she said she could come if I needed her to. She's been worried too, ever since I told her what I've been seeing." As Brooks stepped out to coordinate the formal statement process, Noah found himself alone with Jonah and Lily, who had woken up and was listening to the conversation with the serious expression she wore when processing difficult information. "Jonah," Lily said suddenly, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you for trying to help me." The teenager's eyes filled with tears. "I should have done more sooner." "You were scared," Lily said, with the wisdom of a child who understood fear intimately. "Sometimes it's hard to know what to do when grown-ups are confusing." Noah felt his chest tighten with pride for his daughter's compassion, even towards someone who'd witnessed her suffering without immediately intervening. It spoke to her innate goodness, her ability to understand complexity and forgive human weakness. Brooks returned with paperwork and a victim advocate, a kind-faced woman who introduced herself as Maria Santos. "I'll be working with your family throughout the legal process," she explained to Noah. "My job is to make sure Lily's needs are prioritized and that she has support every step of the way." The next 2 hours were a marathon of statements, documentation, and legal procedures. Lily answered questions with remarkable composure, her matter-of-fact recounting of events both heartbreaking and helpful for building the case. When asked to describe the worst incident she could remember, she thought carefully before responding. "Last week when Daddy was in Portland, Celine got really angry because I spilled water on my homework. She grabbed my arm really tight and shook me, and she said that Daddy was going to get tired of having a daughter who couldn't do anything right. She said maybe I should go back to living with the doctors so Daddy could have a normal family." The room fell silent except for the soft scratch of Brooks' pen across paper. Noah closed his eyes, trying to maintain his composure in front of his daughter, but inside he was screaming with rage at the psychological torture Lily had endured. "What did you do then?" Brooks asked gently. "I said I was sorry, and I would try harder. And then I went to my room and drew a picture of me and Daddy being happy, because thinking about that made me feel better." Maria Santos leaned forward. "Lily, you know that none of this was your fault, right? When adults hurt children, it's always the adult's fault, never the child's." Lily nodded solemnly. "Dr. Martinez explained that to me. She said sometimes grown-ups have big feelings they don't know how to handle, and they make bad choices. But that doesn't mean kids deserve to get hurt." The wisdom in her words, the way she'd already begun processing the trauma with help from the medical team, gave Noah hope that healing was possible. His daughter was stronger than he'd given her credit for, more resilient than anyone should have to be at 6 years old. As they prepared to leave the station, Brooks pulled Noah aside. "We'll be moving forward with charges," she said quietly. "Aggravated assault on a child endangerment, possibly others depending on what else we uncover. I want you to know that cases like this can be emotionally difficult as they work through the system." "Whatever it takes," Noah said firmly. "I want her held accountable for what she's done." "There's something else." Brooks continued, her expression troubled. "In cases involving family dynamics like this, it's not uncommon for the perpetrator to try to manipulate the narrative. Celine may attempt to paint herself as the victim or suggest that you're overreacting. She might try to use your daughter's disability or her own position in the community to generate sympathy." As if summoned by the warning, Noah's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged him in a social media post. He opened it to find a photo of Celine at a charity event from the previous month, smiling as she presented a check to a children's hospital. The caption read, "Heartbroken to learn that some people will exploit the system to destroy innocent lives. The truth will come out. False accusations. Stand with Celine." Noah's blood ran cold as he realized the post already had dozens of comments and shares. Celine was getting ahead of the story, positioning herself as the wronged party before the facts could be established. "She's already starting." He showed Brooks the post. "How do we combat this? We stick to the facts and let the evidence speak for itself," Brooks said grimly. "But I won't lie to you. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." As they finally left the police station near midnight, Lily asleep in Noah's arms, he felt the weight of the battle ahead settling on his shoulders. It wasn't just about seeking justice for his daughter anymore. It was about protecting her from a campaign of manipulation and character assassination that would try to paint her as a liar and him as a gullible fool. But as he looked down at Lily's peaceful face, he felt something stronger than fear or anger. He felt determination. Celine had miscalculated in thinking she could control the narrative through social media campaigns and public relations tactics. She was about to learn that a father protecting his child was a force more powerful than any spin machine she could deploy. The hotel room was small but clean, with 2 double beds and a view of the city lights. As Noah tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, are people going to think I'm a liar?" The question pierced his heart. "Some people might," he said honestly. "But the people who matter, the doctors, the police, the judges, they're going to listen to the truth. And the truth is that you're brave and honest and deserve to be protected." "What if Celine comes back? She's not allowed to come near you anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Lily was quiet for a long moment. "I'm glad you came home early today." "Me too, baby girl. Me too." As Noah settled into the chair beside her bed, his phone buzzed one final time. A text from his lawyer. "Saw the social media posts. We need to meet first thing tomorrow. This is going to be a fight." Noah deleted the message and turned off his phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight in courtrooms and public opinion. But tonight, his daughter was safe. Tonight the truth was documented, and justice was in motion. And tonight, for the first time in months, Lily fell asleep without fear. The morning sun filtered through the hotel room's gauzy curtains, casting soft patterns across Lily's sleeping face, as Noah sat hunched over his laptop, scrolling through the digital nightmare that had exploded overnight. Celine's social media campaign had metastasized beyond that single post into a coordinated assault on reality itself. #StandWithCeline was trending locally, accompanied by carefully curated photos of her volunteering at children's hospitals, reading to elementary school classes, and accepting awards for her philanthropic work. Noah's phone buzzed with a call from his lawyer, David Chen, whose voice carried the grim satisfaction of someone who'd seen this playbook before. "She's good, I'll give her that," David said without preamble. Professional victim with a masterclass in narrative control. But she made one crucial mistake. "What's that?" Noah asked, stepping into the bathroom so his voice wouldn't wake Lily. She went public before her lawyer could stop her. Every post, every interview, every carefully crafted sob story is now evidence of consciousness of guilt. She's essentially providing us with a roadmap of her lies. Before Noah could respond, his phone chimed with an alert from the security system at their house. Someone was on the property. The camera feed showed a news van parked outside a perfectly coiffed reporter, adjusting her microphone while a cameraman tested angles. Noah's stomach dropped as he realized Celine had given their address to the media. "David, they found the house. There are reporters outside." "Expected. I'll get a restraining order filed within the hour to keep them off your property. But Noah, there's something else. Celine's attorney reached out this morning. They want to meet." The hotel room suddenly felt too small, too exposed. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where they offer you a deal to make this all go away quietly. They're scared, which means we have them on the defensive." As Noah ended the call, Lily stirred in her bed, her dark eyes opening with the cautious alertness of a child who'd learned that mornings could bring danger. "Daddy, are we still safe?" "We're safe, sweetheart," Noah said, settling beside her on the bed. "But we need to stay here a little longer while some grown-up things get figured out." Lily nodded with the matter-of-fact acceptance that both broke his heart and made him proud. At 6 years old, she shouldn't have to understand concepts like media manipulation and legal strategy. but her experiences had forced a premature wisdom that served her well in crisis. A soft knock at the door made them both freeze. Noah checked the peephole and saw Dr. Priya Rao, the child psychologist Dr. Martinez had recommended. She was a small woman with kind eyes and an expression that radiated competence and compassion. "Dr. Rao," Noah said as he opened the door. "Thank you for coming here." "Hotel rooms aren't ideal for therapy sessions," she said with a gentle smile. "But sometimes we adapt to circumstances." "Hello, Lily. I'm Dr. Rao, and I'm here to listen to anything you want to tell me." What followed was an hour of careful conversation that felt more like a friendly chat than a clinical evaluation. Dr. Rao had brought art supplies and asked Lily to draw her family, her home, her feelings. The pictures that emerged told a story more devastating than any police report could capture. In Lily's drawings, Noah was always smiling, always close by. Celine appeared as a figure with storm clouds around her head and sharp angles where her hands should be. The house was divided into safe spaces and dangerous ones, with Lily's room marked by dark scribbles that Dr. Rao explained represented fear and confusion. These drawings show a child who's been living in a state of chronic stress, Dr. Rao explained quietly to Noah, while Lily played with therapeutic toys in the corner. The dissociation between the public and private versions of her stepmother indicates sophisticated psychological abuse. This wasn't just physical violence. It was a systematic campaign to make her doubt her own perceptions. The clinical language couldn't soften the impact of those words. Noah felt sick, thinking about his bright, sensitive daughter being subjected to such calculated cruelty. What kind of long-term effects are we looking at? With proper support, children are remarkably resilient. But she'll need ongoing therapy to process the trauma and rebuild her sense of safety. The fact that you believed her immediately and took action will help enormously with her recovery. Dr. Rao's phone buzzed with an urgent message, and her expression darkened as she read it. "Noah, I need to show you something. A colleague just sent me a link to a local news interview that aired 20 minutes ago." The video showed Celine sitting in an elegant living room that Noah didn't recognize, probably her lawyer's office, staged to look like a private home. She was dressed in soft pastels, her hair styled to look casual, but still perfect, her eyes bright with unshed tears that somehow never quite fell. "It breaks my heart to see how this situation has been twisted," Celine said to the interviewer, her voice trembling with apparent emotion. "Lily is a special needs child who requires firm boundaries and consistent structure. Sometimes that means saying no when she doesn't want to do her physical therapy or her homework. But somehow those normal parenting moments have been turned into something sinister." Noah's hands clenched into fists as he watched his ex-wife weave her web of lies with the skill of a master manipulator. She spoke about Lily's behavioral challenges and attention-seeking patterns, painting a picture of a difficult child who made false accusations when disciplined. "Noah is a wonderful father," Celine continued. "But he's been so busy with work that he hasn't seen how Lily has learned to manipulate situations to get sympathy. When he came home early and saw me trying to enforce boundaries, she immediately played the victim to turn him against me." The interviewer leaned forward with practiced sympathy. "That must be devastating for you, especially given your history of working with children's charities." "It is." Celine dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I've devoted my life to helping vulnerable children, and now I'm being painted as some kind of monster. The truth is, I love Lily like my own daughter. I was trying to help her become more independent, more resilient. But apparently, that's been misinterpreted as abuse." Dr. Rao paused the video, her professional composure barely containing her anger. "This is textbook Darvo deny attack, reverse victim and offender. She's positioning herself as the real victim while subtly attacking Lily's credibility." "How do we fight this?" Noah asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. "With truth documentation and expert testimony. But more importantly, We protect Lily from seeing any of this. Children who've been abused are particularly vulnerable to gaslighting campaigns like this one. As if sensing the tension in the room, Lily looked up from her toys. Is Celine on TV talking about me? The innocence of the question, the matter-of-fact way she accepted that her private trauma might become public entertainment, made Noah's vision blur with fury. No, sweetheart. Some grown-ups are having boring conversations about boring grown-up things. Before Dr. Rao could respond, Noah's phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media mentions all flooding in at once. His business partners, employees, clients, and friends had seen the interview. Some offered support, others expressed shock and confusion, and a few seemed to be distancing themselves already. One message made his blood run cold. It was from his head of security at the office. Sir, we have a situation. Protesters outside the building. Some supporting you, some supporting Celine. Media crews setting up. Recommend you stay away today. The speed with which their private crisis had become a public spectacle was breathtaking and terrifying. Noah realized that Celine's strategy wasn't just about avoiding criminal charges. It was about destroying his reputation and credibility so thoroughly that even if she lost in court, she'd win in the arena of public opinion. Dr. Rao, Noah said suddenly, I need you to document everything about Lily's condition, her responses, her drawings. If this goes to trial, we'll need expert testimony that can cut through the noise. Already on it, she replied, making notes in her tablet. But Noah, there's something else we need to discuss. Lily's going to need preparation for what's coming. If this case goes public, she may be called to testify. We need to make sure she's emotionally ready for that possibility. The thought of his 6-year-old daughter sitting in a courtroom facing cross-examination about her abuse, while cameras rolled and reporters took notes, made Noah's chest tighten with protective fury. Is there any way to avoid that? Possibly. Some jurisdictions allow recorded testimony or testimony via closed-circuit television for child victims. But she needs to understand that she might have to tell her story to people who don't want to believe her. Lily looked up at the mention of her name, her face serious. Will I have to talk to more people about the hurting? Dr. Rao knelt down to Lily's eye level. Maybe, sweetheart. If you do, it will be because telling the truth helps make sure you and other children stay safe. But you won't be alone, and you won't be in trouble no matter what you say. What if people think I'm lying like Celine says? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Dr. Rao exchanged a look with Noah that conveyed volumes about the psychological warfare they were facing. Some people might, Dr. Rao said gently. But the important people, the doctors, the judges, the people whose job it is to keep children safe, they know how to tell when children are telling the truth. And we have lots of evidence that shows you're being honest. As Dr. Rao packed up her materials, Noah's phone rang with a call from Sergeant Brooks. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger when she answered. Noah, we have a problem. Celine's legal team filed a motion claiming that Lily's testimony is unreliable due to her disability and history in foster care. They're arguing that she's been coached to make false accusations. The calculated cruelty of using Lily's cerebral palsy and traumatic history as weapons against her credibility made Noah see red. Can they do that? They can try. But we have medical evidence, witness testimony, and video footage. Plus, their client just went on television and contradicted several statements she made to us yesterday. Her story is already falling apart. Brooks's next words made Noah's heart stop. There's more. We've been contacted by 3 other families who've had dealings with Celine in childcare situations. Similar patterns of behavior, similar targeting of vulnerable children. The implications hit Noah like a physical blow. This wasn't an isolated incident or a moment of lost control. Celine was a predator who specifically targeted disabled children and their families. The scope of her manipulation and abuse might be far broader than anyone had realized. How many children? Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We're still investigating, but it looks like Lily might not be her first victim. We're building a pattern of behavior that goes back several years. As Brooks continued outlining the expanded investigation, Noah watched Lily quietly organizing her toys, with the methodical precision she'd developed as a coping mechanism. This brave little girl who'd endured months of abuse while trying to protect her father's feelings was potentially just one of several victims in a larger web of exploitation. The hotel room phone rang, startling them all. Noah answered cautiously, and David Chen's voice came through the speaker with barely contained excitement. Noah, you need to see this. One of Celine's former employers just came forward with security footage from 2 years ago. It shows her screaming at a group of special needs children in a daycare setting. She was fired, but signed an NDA that prevented them from speaking publicly. They're willing to break it now. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Celine hadn't simply lost control with Lily. She had a history of targeting the most vulnerable children in her care. The charming public persona, the charity work, the carefully crafted image of a devoted stepmother were all part of an elaborate cover for systematic abuse. Dr. Rao, who had been listening to the conversation, leaned forward with professional interest. This changes everything from a psychological perspective. We're not dealing with situational abuse or a moment of lost control. This is predatory behavior with a clear pattern of victim selection. Before anyone could respond, a commotion outside the hotel window drew their attention. A crowd had gathered in the parking lot, reporters, photographers, and what appeared to be both supporters and protesters. Someone had found their location. Daddy, Lily said quietly, why are all those people here? Noah looked down at his daughter, this incredible little girl who'd already shown more courage and wisdom than most adults possessed, and felt something crystallize in his chest. Enough. Enough hiding, enough defensive positioning, enough letting Celine control the narrative. They're here because some people want to know the truth, he said, his voice steady and strong. And I think it's time we told them exactly what that truth is. Dr. Rao raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Celine made a mistake by going public. She opened the door to a conversation she's not prepared to have. Noah pulled up his contact list and found the number for Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist he'd worked with on business stories. If she wants to play this game in the media, let's play. But we're going to play with facts, evidence, and the voices of other victims she's tried to silence. As Noah dialed Sarah's number, Lily reached over and took his free hand in her small one. Are we going to help other kids like me? Yes, sweetheart. We're going to make sure nobody else gets hurt the way you did. The conversation with Sarah lasted 20 minutes and ended with her agreement to investigate the broader pattern of Celine's behavior. She had the resources and connections to dig deep into the story, to find other victims, and to expose the systematic nature of the abuse. When Noah hung up, he felt something he hadn't experienced since walking into Lily's room 2 days ago: hope. Not just hope for justice, but hope that this nightmare might actually serve a larger purpose. If their fight could prevent other children from suffering, if their courage could give other victims a voice, then maybe something good could come from the pain. Dr. Rao, he said suddenly, I want to establish a foundation, something that provides legal support and therapeutic services for families dealing with abuse cases involving disabled children. Can you help me design something that would actually make a difference? Dr. Rao's eyes lit up with professional excitement. Absolutely. There's a huge gap in services for exactly these kinds of cases. Most families don't have the resources to fight predators who use the system against them. As they began sketching out ideas for the foundation, Noah felt the weight of the crisis shifting. Instead of being victims reacting to Celine's attacks, they were becoming advocates with a proactive mission. The foundation would be Lily's legacy proof that even the worst human cruelty could be transformed into a force for protection and healing. But first, they had to survive the war that Celine had declared. And judging by the growing crowd outside their hotel and the steady stream of media requests flooding Noah's phone, that war was just beginning. Lily looked up from her drawings, her face serious, but unafraid. "Daddy, when we help other kids, will you tell them that it gets better?" "I'll tell them that there are people who will fight for them," Noah promised. "People who will believe them and protect them and make sure they're never alone." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction, returning to her art. Because being alone is the scariest part. As the afternoon sun shifted across the hotel room, casting new shadows and highlighting the determination on both their faces, Noah realized that Celine had made a fatal miscalculation. She'd assumed that a disabled child and her adoptive father would be easy targets, that their vulnerability would make them silent and compliant. Instead, she'd awakened something far more dangerous than she could have imagined, a father's love combined with a child's courage, backed by growing evidence and supported by professionals who understood exactly what they were fighting against. The real battle was about to begin. The courthouse steps were a battlefield of flashing cameras and shouted questions as Noah carried Lily through the gauntlet of reporters, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. 3 weeks had passed since that first night in the hotel, 3 weeks of legal maneuvering and media warfare that had transformed their private trauma into a public crusade. Now, on this gray October morning, they were walking into the hearing that would determine not just Celine's fate, but the future of every vulnerable child who might cross her path. "Mr. Armitage, is it true that you're seeking millions in damages?" A reporter thrust a microphone toward them, but Noah's security detail, a necessity now given the death threats from Celine's more rabid supporters, kept the media at bay. Inside the courthouse, the hallways buzzed with controlled chaos. David Chen met them at the metal detectors, his expression grim but determined. "The prosecutor just informed me that Celine's team filed a last-minute motion to have Lily's testimony excluded entirely. They're claiming she's been coached and that her disability makes her testimony unreliable." Noah felt his jaw clench with familiar rage. "On what grounds?" "They've hired Dr. Marcus Webb as an expert witness. He's going to testify that children with cerebral palsy often have cognitive impairments that affect memory and truthfulness." David's voice carried barely controlled disgust. "It's a desperation move, but it could work if the judge buys into outdated stereotypes about disability." The calculated cruelty of the strategy took Noah's breath away. Not only were they trying to silence Lily, they were using her disability, the very thing that had made her vulnerable to Celine's abuse, as a weapon against her credibility. "Daddy," Lily whispered against his ear, "why is everyone so angry?" "They're not angry at you, sweetheart," Noah murmured back. "Some people are just confused about what's true and what's not. But we know the truth, and that's what matters." Dr. Priya Rao appeared beside them, her usual calm demeanor replaced by fierce determination. "Noah, I've reviewed Dr. Webb's methodology. It's based on research from the 1980s that's been thoroughly debunked. I can tear his testimony apart, but we need to be prepared for him to make Lily sound incompetent." As they made their way to the courtroom, Noah spotted a familiar figure near the witness waiting area. Jonah Lee, now 17 and looking older than his years, sat with his mother, both of them pale with nervous energy. The teenager had become a reluctant hero in the media coverage, his video evidence and courageous testimony making him a symbol of the importance of speaking up for vulnerable victims. "Jonah," Noah called out, and the young man stood quickly, his face flushing with embarrassment and pride. "Mr. Armitage, I'm ready," Jonah said, his voice stronger than it had been weeks ago. I've been practicing with the prosecutor. I know what I need to say. Before Noah could respond, a commotion near the courtroom entrance drew their attention. Celine had arrived with her legal team, and she looked nothing like the broken woman who'd been packing her bags 3 weeks ago. She was immaculately dressed in a conservative navy suit, her hair styled in a way that suggested both professionalism and vulnerability. Her legal team had clearly invested in image consulting, transforming her from accused abuser to sympathetic defendant. But it was the group of people surrounding her that made Noah's blood run cold. A dozen supporters, all wearing matching buttons that read, "Justice for Celine," including several faces he recognized from the children's charities where she'd volunteered. They'd bought into her narrative, completely convinced that she was the victim of a vindictive ex-husband and a disturbed child's lies. "Look how confident she looks," Dr. Rao observed quietly. Classic narcissistic behavior. She genuinely believes her own lies at this point. Celine's eyes found Noah across the hallway, and for just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. The look she gave him was pure venom, a flash of rage that reminded him exactly why they were here. Then she smiled and waved at Lily, her expression shifting to one of theatrical sadness. "Poor little thing," Celine said loudly enough for nearby reporters to hear. "I hope someday she understands that everything I did was to help her become stronger." The sheer audacity of the statement positioning child abuse as tough love made several people in the hallway gasp audibly. Even some of Celine's supporters looked uncomfortable with the implications of her words. Judge Maria Santos, no relation to their victim advocate, called the court to order with the no-nonsense authority of someone who'd presided over hundreds of family court cases. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through pretense and manipulation with surgical precision. "This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on charges of aggravated assault, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit child abuse," Judge Santos announced. "I want to make one thing clear from the outset. This courtroom will be a place of facts, not theater. Any attempts to grandstand or manipulate proceedings will result in immediate sanctions." The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Lisa Morgan, was a woman in her 30s who specialized in crimes against children. She opened with a presentation that was both methodical and devastating, laying out the timeline of abuse with medical records, video evidence, and expert testimony that painted a clear picture of systematic targeting and manipulation. "Your Honor," Morgan began, "the evidence will show that the defendant engaged in a calculated campaign of abuse against 6-year-old Lily Armitage, specifically targeting her vulnerability as a disabled child and using her traumatic history in foster care as a psychological weapon." The first witness was Dr. Martinez, who testified about the medical evidence with clinical precision. The photographs of Lily's injuries filled the courtroom's monitors, and Noah heard several gasps from the gallery as the full extent of the abuse became visible. "The bruising patterns are consistent with grabbing, shaking, and deliberate pushing," Dr. Martinez explained. "The injuries occurred over a period of at least 6 weeks, indicating ongoing abuse rather than isolated incidents." Celine's attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Blackwood, who charged $500 an hour to defend the indefensible Rose for cross-examination with practiced skepticism. "Dr. Martinez, isn't it true that children with cerebral palsy are more prone to bruising due to their mobility challenges? Some children with CP may bruise more easily, but the pattern and location of these injuries are inconsistent with accidental trauma. These bruises were caused by deliberate force applied by an adult hand. But you can't definitively rule out the possibility that these injuries were self-inflicted or caused by falls, can you?" Dr. Martinez's expression hardened. "Mr. Blackwood, I've been treating children for 20 years. The idea that a 6-year-old with limited mobility could inflict this pattern of injuries on herself is medically absurd. The exchange continued for another 10 minutes, with Blackwood trying every angle to create doubt about the medical evidence. But Dr. Martinez held firm her expertise and moral authority, making his insinuations sound increasingly desperate. Next came Jonah Lee, whose testimony proved to be the emotional centerpiece of the hearing. The teenager walked to the witness stand with visible nervousness, but his voice grew stronger as he began to speak. "I knew something was wrong for weeks before I started recording." Jonah said, his words carrying the weight of guilt and determination. "I could hear shouting from the house, and I'd see Lily in the backyard with bruises she'd try to hide. But I was scared to say anything, because I wasn't sure, and Celine always seemed so nice when other people were around." When the prosecutor played Jonah's video recording, the courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of Celine's voice berating a disabled child for being unable to perform physical tasks that would challenge any 6-year-old. Even some of Celine's supporters looked uncomfortable as they heard the cold cruelty in her words. "What made you finally decide to speak up?" Morgan asked. "When I saw Mr. Armitage come home that day and catch her in the act, I realized that if I didn't say something, she might find a way to make everyone think he was imagining things. Lily needed someone to back up her story." Blackwood's cross-examination of Jonah was brutal, attacking the teenager's motives and suggesting he'd manufactured evidence to gain attention. But Jonah held steady, his answers consistent and his moral conviction unshakable. "Isn't it true that you have a history of conflict with Mrs. Ward?" Blackwood demanded. "No, sir. I barely knew her before this happened." "But you admit you secretly recorded private family moments without consent." "I recorded evidence of child abuse that was happening in plain sight of anyone who cared to look." The afternoon brought Dr. Priya Rao to the stand, and her testimony provided the psychological framework that tied all the evidence together. She explained how Celine had systematically targeted Lily's vulnerabilities, using her disability and history of abandonment as tools of control. This wasn't random violence or momentary loss of control, Dr. Rao testified. The defendant specifically chose to abuse Lily when her father was traveling, used threats of abandonment that targeted her deepest fears, and employed sophisticated psychological manipulation to ensure silence. When Blackwood tried to suggest that Dr. Rao had coached Lily's responses, the psychologist's professionalism gave way to controlled fury. "Mr. Blackwood, I've spent 3 weeks helping a traumatized child process systematic abuse. The idea that I would further victimize her by coaching false testimony is not only professionally insulting, it's morally reprehensible." The day's most dramatic moment came when the prosecution introduced evidence that Noah had been dreading emails between Celine and her mother that had been recovered from her personal devices. The messages revealed a level of calculation that shocked even the seasoned court officers. "You need to be more strategic about the custody situation," read one email from Celine's mother. "If Noah thinks the girl is too much trouble, he might be willing to send her back to state care. Then you'd have him to yourself and access to his money without the burden." Another message sent just 2 weeks before Noah's discovery was even more chilling. "The key is making sure she's afraid to tell him anything. Use her fear of abandonment. Remind her that families get tired of difficult children." The emails painted a picture of abuse that was not only deliberate, but strategically planned to achieve specific outcomes. Celine hadn't just lost control. She'd methodically tortured a child to eliminate what she saw as competition for Noah's attention and resources. As the prosecutor read the emails aloud, Noah watched Celine's reaction carefully. For the first time since the hearing began, her composed mask cracked completely. Her face went pale. Her hands trembled, and she leaned over to whisper urgently to her attorney with obvious panic. Judge Santos called a brief recess, and during the break, Noah overheard fragments of heated conversation between Celine and her legal team. She was furious that the emails had been recovered, apparently believing they'd been permanently deleted. Her anger wasn't about the content of the messages, it was about being caught. When court resumed, Blackwood made a motion to exclude the emails, arguing they were taken without proper warrant. But Judge Santos denied the motion with thinly veiled contempt. The emails were recovered during a lawful investigation of child abuse, Mr. Blackwood. They speak directly to your client's state of mind and planning. They will remain in evidence. The defense's case began with character witnesses who painted Celine as a devoted advocate for children's causes. CEOs of charities testified about her fundraising efforts. Former colleagues described her as dedicated and caring, and a parade of community leaders vouched for her reputation. But their testimony felt hollow in the face of the medical evidence and documented abuse. Several witnesses appeared uncomfortable when pressed about their actual knowledge of Celine's interactions with children, admitting they'd only seen her at formal events and fundraising galas. The defense's expert witness, Dr. Marcus Webb, proved to be exactly as problematic as Dr. Rao had predicted. His testimony about the unreliability of disabled children's memories was based on outdated research and delivered with an arrogance that alienated even Celine's supporters. Children with cognitive disabilities often confabulate memories to gain attention. Webb testified, "It's not intentional lying, but rather a manifestation of their neurological differences." Dr. Rao's cross-examination of Webb was surgical in its precision. She systematically dismantled his credentials, his research methodology, and his outdated understanding of cerebral palsy. "Dr. Webb, when was the last time you actually treated a child with cerebral palsy?" "I don't treat patients directly. I focus on research and consultation." "So your opinions about Lily Armitage are based entirely on theoretical frameworks rather than clinical experience?" Research provides a broader perspective than individual case studies. "Research from what decade?" "Because the studies you've cited have been discredited for over 20 years. By the time Dr. Rao finished her cross-examination, Webb's testimony had been completely undermined. Even Judge Santos looked skeptical of his claims, and several jury members were shaking their heads in obvious disapproval. The hearing's climax came when the prosecution called their final witness, Sarah Chen, the investigative journalist who had uncovered 3 additional victims of Celine's abuse. Her testimony revealed a pattern of targeting that went back 5 years and involved children at multiple facilities where Celine had worked or volunteered. The defendant specifically sought positions that gave her access to vulnerable children. Chen testified, "Children with disabilities, children from troubled backgrounds, children whose voices might not be believed if they spoke up." Chen's investigation had uncovered employment records showing that Celine had been quietly dismissed from 2 previous positions involving childcare. Non-disclosure agreements had kept the family silent, but they were now coming forward with their own stories of abuse and manipulation. One mother told me that her autistic son came home with bruises and suddenly became terrified of going to the daycare where Mrs. Ward worked. Chen continued, "When she complained, she was told her son was acting out and that the staff were trained to handle difficult behaviors." As Chen's testimony continued, painting a picture of systematic predation across multiple venues and victims, Noah watched Celine's supporters in the gallery begin to shift uncomfortably. The carefully constructed narrative of a caring stepmother facing false accusations was crumbling under the weight of documented evidence and multiple corroborating victims. The prosecution's closing argument was delivered with quiet intensity that made every word hit like a hammer blow. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The defendant deliberately targeted a disabled child, systematically abused her over a period of months, and used sophisticated psychological manipulation to ensure her silence. This was not a moment of lost control. It was a calculated campaign of cruelty." Blackwood's closing argument felt desperate by comparison, relying on character references and attempts to discredit the evidence that rang hollow after days of devastating testimony. His suggestion that Noah had coached Lily and conspired with neighbors to frame an innocent woman sounded increasingly absurd. Ladies and gentlemen, we're being asked to believe that a respected member of our community, a woman who has devoted her life to helping children, suddenly became a monster. The more likely explanation is that a grieving father, overwhelmed by the challenges of raising a disabled child, has allowed his imagination to transform normal discipline into something sinister. But even as Blackwood spoke, Noah could see that the argument wasn't landing. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear, the victims too credible. Judge Santos took only 30 minutes to reach her decision. When she returned to the bench, her expression was granite hard with moral certainty. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony presented, this court finds probable cause to believe that the defendant committed the crimes charged. The case will proceed to trial. She paused, her gaze fixing on Celine with unmistakable contempt. Furthermore, given the defendant's history of targeting vulnerable victims and the potential for witness intimidation, bail is revoked. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. The courtroom erupted in chaos as Celine's supporters gasped in shock, and her legal team immediately began filing motions for appeal. But Noah barely heard the commotion. His attention was focused on Lily, who was sitting quietly beside him, processing the judge's words with the serious concentration she brought to difficult concepts. "Does this mean she can't hurt me anymore?" Lily asked. "It means you're safe," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means the grown-ups whose job it is to protect children believe you and are going to make sure justice is served." As deputies led Celine away in handcuffs, she turned back toward Noah and Lily with a look of pure hatred that reminded everyone present exactly why they were there. For just a moment, the mask of civilized victimhood fell away completely, revealing the predator beneath. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently, her eyes fixed on Lily with unmistakable malice. But Noah felt no fear, only a deep satisfaction that the truth had finally emerged into the light. The real battle was just beginning, but they'd won the first crucial victory. Celine would face trial for her crimes. Other victims were finding their voices, and most importantly, Lily was safe. As they left the courthouse, surrounded by supporters and advocates who had rallied to their cause, Noah realized that something fundamental had changed. They were no longer victims fighting for survival. They were survivors building something better from the ashes of their trauma. The foundation they discussed was becoming reality. Other families were coming forward with their own stories, and Lily was healing with the support of people who understood her courage and valued her truth. Justice was finally within reach. 6 months after Judge Santos's gavel had sealed Celine's fate, Noah stood in the gleaming lobby of the new Safe Steps Foundation headquarters, watching Lily demonstrate her latest achievement to a group of visiting donors. She was walking independently now, her gait still careful but confident, her crutches relegated to backup support rather than primary necessity. The physical therapy had been transformative, but it was the emotional healing that truly took Noah's breath away. And this is where we have group sessions for kids who've been through scary things, Lily explained to the assembled adults, her voice clear and strong as she pointed toward the colorful therapy rooms. Dr. Rao says talking about feelings with other kids who understand makes the scared feelings smaller. The donors, corporate executives, foundation leaders, and philanthropists listened with the kind of respectful attention usually reserved for much older speakers. At 7 now, Lily had become an unexpected advocate, her natural empathy and hard-won wisdom making her the foundation's most effective spokesperson. Dr. Priya Rao emerged from one of the therapy rooms, leading a small group of children toward the art therapy studio. Among them was Marcus, an 8-year-old with autism who'd been one of Celine's earlier victims, and Sophia, a 10-year-old with spina bifida, whose foster mother had been abusing her for years before Safe Steps intervened. The healing happens in community, Dr. Rao explained to the donors as the children settled into their creative activities. When children see other survivors thriving, it gives them permission to believe in their own recovery. Noah felt his chest tighten with pride and purpose as he watched the scene unfold. What had begun as their personal nightmare had evolved into something that was touching dozens of lives. The foundation now operated 3 centers across the state, provided legal advocacy for over 200 families, and had successfully lobbied for legislation strengthening protections for disabled children in institutional settings. But the real measure of their success wasn't in statistics or policy changes. It was in moments like this, when children who'd been silenced by abuse found their voices and used them to help others. "Daddy, the reporters are here," Lily announced, tugging on Noah's sleeve as a news crew entered the lobby. "Are you ready for the big announcement?" Today marked the 1-year anniversary of Celine's conviction, and Noah had chosen this date to reveal the Foundation's most ambitious project yet, a national network of rapid response legal teams specifically trained to handle abuse cases involving disabled children. The announcement had drawn media attention from across the country, but more importantly, it had drawn other survivors. Jonah Lee, now 18, and a freshman at Stanford studying social justice, had flown in for the event. He'd become something of a celebrity in his own right after starting a national movement, encouraging young people to speak up when they witnessed abuse. His See Something, Say Something campaign had reached millions of teenagers through social media, fundamentally changing how young people thought about their responsibility to protect vulnerable peers. "Mr. Armitage," Jonah said as he approached with his characteristic shy smile, "I wanted you to see this before the press conference." He handed Noah a tablet displaying a social media post that had gone viral overnight. It was a video testimonial from a 14-year-old girl in Texas who'd used Jonah's resources to report her teacher's abuse of special needs students. The investigation had led to the teacher's arrest and the discovery of a pattern of abuse spanning 3 school districts. "She said seeing our story gave her courage to speak up," Jonah continued. "Her post has been shared over 1 million times, and we're getting messages from kids all over the world who are finding their voices." The ripple effects of their fight continued to spread in ways Noah had never imagined. What started as one father protecting his daughter had become a movement that was changing how society understood and responded to the abuse of vulnerable children. Sarah Chen, the investigative journalist who'd helped expose Celine's broader pattern of abuse, joined them with a thick folder of documents. "Noah, I need to show you something before the press conference. We've been investigating similar cases nationwide, and the pattern is more extensive than we thought." The documents revealed a network of abuse that stretched across multiple states, involving caregivers who specifically targeted disabled children in foster care group homes and specialized facilities. Celine hadn't been working alone. She'd been part of a loose network of predators who shared tactics and moved between positions when they came under scrutiny. "The FBI is opening a federal investigation," Sarah continued. "Your case broke open something much bigger than we realized. Dozens of facilities are under review, and they're finding systematic abuse that's been covered up for years." The magnitude of the revelation was staggering. Their fight for Lily had uncovered a hidden epidemic of abuse that had been flourishing in the shadows of institutions meant to protect the most vulnerable children. Noah felt simultaneously horrified by the scope of the problem and energized by the possibility of finally addressing it systematically. Dr. Martinez appeared beside them, her expression mixing professional satisfaction with personal emotion. "Noah, I wanted you to know that Lily's medical files have become a teaching tool at the medical school. We're training the next generation of pediatricians to recognize abuse patterns in disabled children. Her courage is literally saving lives. As the press conference began, Noah found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The terror of that first night in the hotel had been replaced by purpose and hope. The isolation they'd felt during Celine's media campaign had given way to a community of supporters and fellow advocates. Most importantly, Lily's trauma had been transformed into a source of strength that was helping other children find safety and healing. Ladies and gentlemen, Noah began his voice carrying to every corner of the packed auditorium. 1 year ago, my daughter Lily and I learned that the person we trusted most in the world was systematically abusing her. Today, I'm here to announce that her courage in speaking up has led to the creation of the largest network of legal advocates for abused disabled children in the nation's history. The announcement of the national network drew enthusiastic applause, but it was Lily's unscheduled decision to join him at the podium that brought the audience to their feet. "Hi, everybody," she said into the microphone, her small voice carrying surprising authority. "I want to tell other kids who are scared that it's okay to tell grown-ups when someone hurts you. Even if the person who hurts you says nobody will believe you, there are always grown-ups who will listen and help." The simplicity and power of her words created a moment of profound silence in the auditorium. Here was a 7-year-old child who'd survived systematic abuse and emerged not bitter or broken, but wise and compassionate. Her message reached beyond the immediate audience to touch everyone who would see the footage in the days and weeks to come. After the press conference, as the crowd dispersed and the media crews packed up their equipment, Noah found Lily sitting quietly in the foundation's garden, watching a butterfly land on the flowers they'd planted together. "Penny for your thoughts, kiddo," he said, settling beside her on the small bench. "I was thinking about Celine," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Do you think she knows that hurting me helped other kids?" The question caught Noah off guard, with its complexity and compassion. Even now, Lily was trying to find meaning and purpose in her suffering, searching for ways that her pain might have served a larger good. "I think maybe that's not for her to know," Noah said carefully. "What matters is that you chose to turn something bad into something good. That's your gift to the world, not hers." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Rao says that forgiveness isn't about making the person who hurt you feel better. It's about not letting them keep hurting you in your heart." The wisdom of her words, the emotional sophistication she developed through her healing journey, never ceased to amaze Noah. She'd learned lessons about resilience and compassion that many adults never mastered, and she was using that knowledge to help other children navigate their own trauma. As evening approached, the foundation building, emptied except for Noah, Lily, and Dr. Rao, who was finishing notes from the day's sessions. The three of them had formed an unbreakable bond through their shared mission, becoming a family united not by blood, but by purpose and love. "Daddy," Lily said, as they prepared to leave for the day, "can we stop by the courthouse on the way home?" The request surprised Noah. They rarely visited the place where Celine had been convicted, as Dr. Rao had advised against dwelling on the legal proceedings once they were concluded. "Any particular reason?" he asked. "I want to see the steps where we took the picture after the trial. I want to remember how brave we felt that day." The courthouse steps were empty in the fading light, the imposing building casting long shadows across the plaza. They climbed to the spot where they'd posed for photos after Celine's conviction, and Lily stood quietly for a moment, seeming to absorb the significance of the place. "This is where everything changed," she said finally, "where people believed me and decided to help." Noah knelt beside her, his heart full of pride and love for this extraordinary child who'd found strength in the darkest circumstances. This is where justice happened. But the real change started the day you decided to tell me the truth, even though you were scared. As they made their way home through the city streets, Noah reflected on the transformation their lives had undergone. The luxurious Pacific Heights townhouse had been sold the proceeds, funding the foundation's initial operations. They now lived in a smaller but warmer home in a neighborhood filled with families and children. A place where Lily could ride her adaptive bicycle on tree-lined streets and play with friends who valued her for her kindness rather than pitying her for her disability. Their evening routine had evolved into something sacred: dinner together without distractions, homework at the kitchen table where Noah could provide help, and encouragement bedtime stories that often involved discussions about the day's events and feelings. It was simple, purposeful, and infinitely more meaningful than the frantic lifestyle they'd maintained during his marriage to Celine. "Daddy," Lily said as Noah tucked her into bed, "do you ever miss the old house?" "Do you?" he asked, curious about her perspective. "Sometimes I miss my old room, but not the scared feelings that lived there with me. This house feels safer, even though it's smaller." Noah understood exactly what she meant. Their new home might lack the impressive architecture and prestigious address of their former residence, but it was filled with genuine peace and security. Every room held memories of healing and growth, rather than hidden trauma and suppressed fear. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Noah sat in the chair beside her bed, a ritual they'd maintained since those first nights in the hotel, when she'd needed constant reassurance of his presence. These quiet moments had become his favorite part of each day, a time to marvel at her resilience and plan for their continued mission. His phone buzzed softly with a message from David Chen, their lawyer, who'd become a close friend and informal advisor to the foundation. The text contained a link to a news article about the federal investigation Sarah had mentioned. 12 facilities across 6 states were under investigation, and hundreds of potential victims were being interviewed. The scope of the abuse network was staggering, but so was the scope of the response it had triggered. Another message came through, this one from Dr. Rao. "Noah just got a call from the Department of Education. They want safe steps to help design new national standards for abuse prevention in special education programs. Your daughter's courage is literally changing federal policy." The magnitude of the impact continued to expand in ways Noah had never imagined possible. What had begun as one father's desperate fight to protect his child had evolved into a movement that was transforming how institutions approach the safety and dignity of vulnerable children. A year later, on a sunny spring morning, Noah stood before the largest gathering in Safe Steps Foundation's history. The annual conference had drawn advocates, survivors, legal professionals, and policymakers from around the world. The auditorium was filled with people whose lives had been touched by their story and their work. Lily, now 8 and radiating confidence, took the stage to introduce the keynote speaker, a teenager who'd survived institutional abuse and was now studying to become a disability rights lawyer. The cycle of healing had become a cycle of empowerment, with survivors becoming advocates and advocates becoming leaders in the fight for justice. "Before I introduce our speaker," Lily said, her voice carrying clearly through the large space, "I want to tell you something important. When bad things happen to us, we get to choose what they mean. We can let them make us smaller and sadder, or we can use them to become braver and kinder. Every person in this room chose to be braver and kinder, and that's why other kids are safer today." The standing ovation that followed her words seemed to go on forever, and Noah felt tears streaming down his face as he watched his daughter, this incredible human being who'd transformed her trauma into triumph, command the respect and admiration of hundreds of adults who recognized her wisdom and courage. As the conference concluded and attendees began to disperse, many stopped to share their own stories with Noah and Lily. Parents whose children had been helped by Safe Steps programs, survivors who'd found their voices through the foundation's advocacy work, professionals who'd changed their practices based on the foundation's research and training. Each conversation reinforced the same truth: Their fight had mattered in ways that extended far beyond their personal healing. The courage Lily had shown in speaking up had created a ripple effect that was still spreading, touching lives they would never know, and preventing abuse they would never hear about. That evening, as they sat in their garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Lily turned to Noah with a question that had clearly been on her mind all day. "Daddy, do you think Celine ever thinks about what she did to me?" Noah considered his answer carefully, knowing that Lily's question was really about whether her abuser had gained any insight or remorse during her time in prison. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I know that what she thinks doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you've built from what happened to you. You've helped so many kids find safety and healing. That's your legacy, not hers." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then smiled with the pure joy that had become her trademark since beginning her healing journey. "I think I want to plant more flowers in the garden tomorrow. Maybe some lilies, so other kids who visit will know this is a place where they can grow and be beautiful." As Noah agreed to the gardening project, he realized that they'd found something precious in the aftermath of their trauma. A life filled with purpose, love, and the deep satisfaction that comes from transforming pain into healing for others. The house was quiet now, filled with the peaceful silence of a family that had survived the worst and emerged stronger. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but inside their small sanctuary, Noah and Lily had created something that no amount of money or status could buy: genuine peace earned through courage and sustained by love. Later that night, as Noah checked on Lily one final time before going to bed himself, he found her sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed and content. On her nightstand sat a picture from the Foundation's anniversary celebration. Dozens of children and families whose lives had been changed by their fight for justice. Next to the picture was a small card that one of the children had made for Lily. It was decorated with crayon drawings of flowers and butterflies, and in careful 7-year-old handwriting it read, "Thank you for being brave first, so I could be brave too." Noah smiled as he turned off the light, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve vulnerable children. But tonight, in this moment of perfect peace, he felt the deep satisfaction of a mission accomplished and a life well lived. Their story had begun with betrayal and trauma, but it was ending with triumph and hope. Lily was safe. Other children were safer because of their courage, and the future held infinite possibilities for continued healing and advocacy. As Noah drifted off to sleep in his own bed in their own home, surrounded by the evidence of lives touched and changed by their journey, he felt profound gratitude for the strange and painful path that had led them to this place of purpose and peace. Love had won in the end. Love for his daughter, love for justice, and love for all the vulnerable children who deserved protection and dignity. And in the morning, there would be more work to do, more lives to touch, more healing to facilitate. But that was tomorrow's gift. Tonight, they were simply a father and daughter who had fought for truth and found something beautiful on the other side of their darkest hour. The lily-shaped cookies Noah had dropped that first terrible day had long since been forgotten. But the courage that moment had required lived on in every child who found safety through their work, every family who discovered healing through their programs, and every survivor who learned that their voice mattered and their truth had power. That was the real ending to their story, not the conclusion of their trauma, but the beginning of their triumph, stretching forward into a future filled with hope, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that love, when coupled with courage, could indeed change the world. Epilogue: The Ripple Effect. 5 years had passed since that first terrible discovery, and Noah found himself standing in the rose garden of the White House, watching President Martinez sign the Noah Armitage Child Protection Act into federal law. The bill, which mandated specialized training for all professionals working with disabled children and established a national database to track abuse patterns across institutions, represented the culmination of years of advocacy work that had grown far beyond anything he could have imagined. Lily, now 12 and poised with the confidence of someone who'd learned early that her voice could change the world, stood beside him in a navy blue dress that she'd chosen specifically because it made her feel serious and important. Her gait was nearly normal now, the result of years of physical therapy and 2 successful surgeries. But more importantly, her spirit radiated the kind of unshakable self-assurance that came from knowing she was valued and protected. This legislation will ensure that what happened to Lily and thousands of other children never happens again. President Martinez said, her voice carrying across the garden to the assembled crowd of advocates, survivors, and lawmakers. It represents our nation's commitment to protecting the most vulnerable among us and holding accountable those who would exploit their trust. As the president signed her name to the bill, Noah felt a complex mix of emotions wash over him. Pride in what they'd accomplished, grief for the trauma that had made it necessary, and hope for the countless children who would be safer because of this moment. The journey from that scattered box of lily-shaped cookies to this ceremony had been longer and more painful than he could have anticipated, but it had also been more meaningful than anything he'd ever achieved in his business career. Dr. Priya Rao, now the director of the National Center for Child Protection Research, that had grown out of their foundation work, leaned over to whisper in his ear. 23 states have already implemented the new protocols. Early data shows a 40% increase in reporting and a 60% increase in successful prosecutions. Lily's story is literally rewriting how we protect children. The statistics were gratifying, but Noah's attention was drawn to something more personal happening nearby. A young woman in her early 20s was approaching Lily with a mixture of nervousness and determination. She was walking with the careful precision of someone with cerebral palsy, and her face carried the kind of focused intensity that Noah had learned to recognize in survivors who'd found their purpose. "Excuse me," the young woman said to Lily, her voice slightly breathless with emotion. "I'm Rebecca Chen. I'm a law student at Georgetown, and I wanted to thank you for what you did when I was 7 years old." Lily's eyes widened with recognition and delight. Rebecca had been one of the first children helped by the Safe Steps Foundation, a little girl who'd been systematically abused by her physical therapist, until Lily's story had given her the courage to speak up. Now she was 3 months away from graduating law school and had already accepted a position with the Department of Justice's new Civil Rights Division for Children with Disabilities. "Rebecca," Lily exclaimed, her formal demeanor dissolving into genuine joy. "You made it. You're going to be a real lawyer." "Because of you," Rebecca said simply. "Because you showed me that disabled kids could be believed and protected, and that our voices mattered just as much as anyone else's." The conversation continued as more people gathered around them, a constellation of survivors, advocates, and professionals whose lives had been touched by their story. Dr. Martinez was there with her latest research on trauma recovery. Jonah Lee, now 23, and fresh from completing his master's degree in social work, had driven down from New York, where he was launching a nonprofit focused on training young people to recognize and report abuse. Sarah Chen had become a best-selling author, whose book about their case had sparked national conversations about disability rights and institutional accountability. But perhaps the most meaningful presence was that of Maria Santos, the victim advocate, who'd supported them through those first terrifying weeks. She was now in her 70s and had officially retired, but she'd made the trip to Washington specifically to witness this moment. "You know," Maria said to Noah as they watched Lily hold court with a group of young advocates, "in 30 years of this work, I've never seen a single case create this kind of lasting change. Most families just want to heal and move on, which is completely understandable. But you two turned your trauma into a mission. Noah considered her words carefully. The truth was that they'd never set out to change the world. They'd simply been trying to protect one little girl and seek justice for what had been done to her. But each step of their journey had revealed new layers of systematic problems that demanded attention, new victims who needed voices, new professionals who needed training. "I think Lily changed us more than we changed anything else," Noah replied. "Her courage taught me that some fights are worth having, regardless of the cost." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, President Martinez approached them personally, her security detail maintaining a respectful distance as she knelt down to Lily's eye level. "Lily," the president said, "I want you to know that this law will be in the history books forever. Someday, when you have children of your own, you'll be able to tell them that their mother helped make the world safer for kids like her." Lily's response surprised everyone within earshot. "Thank you, Madam President, but I think the most important part isn't that it's in the history books. It's that kids who are scared right now will have grown-ups who know how to help them." The president's eyes filled with tears at the simple wisdom of Lily's words. Here was a 12-year-old who understood that real change wasn't about recognition or legacy. It was about practical impact on real lives. That evening, as they sat in their hotel room overlooking the Washington Monument, Noah found himself reflecting on the unexpected turns their life had taken. His technology company had been sold 3 years earlier, with the proceeds funding an endowment that would ensure the Safe Steps Foundation's work could continue in perpetuity. He now spent his days testifying before Congress, consulting with law enforcement agencies, and helping other families navigate the complex legal and emotional challenges of fighting institutional abuse. Lily had thrived in ways that went far beyond her physical recovery. She was an honor student who'd been accepted into a prestigious summer program for young advocates. Her artwork had been featured in galleries with the proceeds supporting other abuse survivors. Most importantly, she'd maintained the empathy and joy that made her such an effective advocate for other vulnerable children. "Daddy," Lily said as she worked on homework at the hotel room's desk, "Mrs. Thompson at school said that some people think I'm famous because of what happened to me. But I don't feel famous. I just feel like me." The observation struck Noah as profoundly insightful. Despite all the media attention, awards, and recognition that had come their way, Lily had remained grounded in her sense of self. She understood that her platform came with responsibility, but she'd never lost sight of the fact that her real value lay in her character rather than her circumstances. "What do you think makes someone truly important?" Noah asked, curious about her perspective. Lily paused in her writing, considering the question with the seriousness she brought to all philosophical discussions. "I think it's not about how many people know your name. It's about whether the people who need help feel safer because you exist." Her words reminded Noah of a conversation he'd had with Celine's former lawyer just 6 months earlier. Richard Blackwood had reached out through intermediaries requesting a private meeting to discuss his client's case. Against David Chen's advice, Noah had agreed to meet with him. Blackwood had aged considerably in the years since the trial, his silver hair now completely white, and his confident demeanor replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. "I need you to know," he'd said without preamble, "that I believe I was wrong about your daughter. About everything." The admission had surprised Noah, who'd expected some kind of appeal for leniency or continued legal maneuvering. Instead, Blackwood had shared that his own granddaughter had been diagnosed with autism the previous year, and the experience of watching her navigate the world had given him new perspective on disability and vulnerability. "I spent my career defending people who I told myself were just misunderstood," Blackwood had continued. "But after watching my granddaughter face the same challenges that Lily faces every day, I realized that I was enabling predators. I was part of the system that silenced vulnerable children." The conversation had lasted for 2 hours, with Blackwood detailing other cases where he now believed his clients had been guilty of exactly the crimes they'd been charged with. He'd offered to provide information that might help with ongoing investigations, and he'd established a scholarship fund for law students interested in victim advocacy work. "I can't undo the harm I caused," he'd said, as their meeting concluded, "but I can try to make sure other lawyers don't make the same mistakes I did." The encounter had reinforced something Noah had learned through their years of advocacy work. People were capable of profound change when confronted with truth and given the opportunity to make amends. Not everyone would take that opportunity. Celine had remained unrepentant even as evidence of her broader abuse pattern had mounted, but enough people did change to make the work worthwhile. Their hotel room phone rang, interrupting Noah's reflection. It was Dr. Rao calling from California, where she was presenting their latest research at an international conference on child protection. "Noah, you need to hear this," Dr. Rao said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "The European Union just announced they're adopting protocols based on our model. 12 countries are implementing the Safe Steps approach to abuse prevention and victim support. This is going global." The news was staggering in its implications. Their work, which had begun as one family's fight for justice, was now influencing child protection policies on multiple continents. The ripple effects had spread far beyond anything they'd imagined possible. But even as Noah absorbed the magnitude of their impact, he found his attention drawn back to Lily, who was now reading a book about marine biology, while absent-mindedly braiding friendship bracelets for the children in the Foundation's summer program. Her ability to balance global advocacy with age-appropriate interests and friendships never ceased to amaze him. "Did you hear that, kiddo?" Noah asked. "Our work is helping kids all over the world now." Lily looked up from her book with a smile that managed to be both proud and humble. "That's really good, Daddy. But I was thinking about something else too." "What's that?" "I want to start a pen pal program for kids who are in the hospital or foster care. Sometimes when you're scared and alone, just knowing that someone your age cares about you can make everything feel less scary." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity, and typical of Lily's instinct to focus on individual connections rather than grand gestures. Within an hour, she was sketching out plans for the program, considering logistics, and thinking through how to match children with appropriate pen pals. As Noah watched her work with focused intensity, he marveled at how naturally she'd grown into her role as an advocate. She'd never had to learn to care about other people's suffering. That empathy seemed to be hardwired into her character. What she'd learned through their journey was how to channel that empathy into effective action. The next morning brought a surprise visit from an unexpected source. Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit knocked on their hotel room door with news that would add another chapter to their ongoing story. "We've arrested 18 people in connection with the network we uncovered through Celine's case," Agent Walsh reported. "The investigation has expanded to include facilities in Canada and Mexico. This may be the largest institutional child abuse conspiracy we've ever prosecuted." The scope of the criminal network that had grown out of their single case was both horrifying and vindicating. It confirmed what they'd suspected from the beginning, that Celine hadn't been working alone, and that the systematic targeting of vulnerable children was far more organized than anyone had realized. "The victims are asking to meet with Lily," Agent Walsh continued, "not for testimony or legal purposes, but for healing. Many of them have said that her courage to speak up gave them permission to tell their own stories." Lily's response was immediate and characteristic. "Of course I'll meet with them. When—" What followed was a gathering unlike anything Noah had ever experienced. 23 survivors ranging in age from 8 to 26 came together in a conference room at the Department of Justice. They shared their stories, their fears, their hopes, and their dreams, with the kind of openness that was only possible among people who'd survived similar trauma. Lily listened to each story with the focused attention of someone who understood every nuance of fear and betrayal they described. When a teenage boy broke down while describing how his group home counselor had convinced him that no one would believe a damaged kid, Lily simply took his hand and said, "You're not damaged, you're surviving. And surviving takes more strength than most people ever have to use." By the end of the day, the group had formed connections that Noah knew would last for years. They'd exchanged contact information, made plans for ongoing support, and created an informal network of survivors who could rely on each other for understanding and encouragement. "This is what real healing looks like," Dr. Rao observed as they watched the survivors embrace and promise to stay in touch. Not just individual recovery, but community building. These young people will never be alone again. As their Washington trip concluded and they prepared to return home, Noah found himself thinking about the future in ways he hadn't before. Lily was approaching her teenage years, and while she'd shown remarkable resilience, he knew that adolescence would bring new challenges and opportunities. "Daddy," Lily said, as their plane taxied toward takeoff, "do you think I'll always want to do this kind of work?" The question revealed the kind of self-awareness that impressed Noah more each day. At 12, Lily was already thinking about how her passions and talents might evolve as she grew older. "I think you'll always care about helping people," Noah replied. "But the way you help might change as you discover new interests and develop new skills." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking that maybe I want to be a doctor, not just to help kids who've been hurt, but to help kids with disabilities live their best lives. Like, what if we could make better equipment or find new treatments?" The idea excited Noah, not just because it showed Lily's continued commitment to helping others, but because it demonstrated her growing understanding of the many ways she could make a difference. She was beginning to see beyond crisis response to the broader questions of how society could better support and include people with disabilities. Their conversation was interrupted by a flight attendant who recognized them from recent news coverage. "I just wanted to thank you both," she said quietly. "My nephew has Down syndrome, and he's safer in school now because of the work you've done. Teachers know how to spot problems and report them properly." The encounter was typical of what had become their daily experience. Everywhere they went, people shared stories about how their advocacy had touched their lives or the lives of people they loved. Each story reinforced the magnitude of the change they'd helped create, but also the ongoing need for vigilance and continued work. As they flew home over the American landscape spread out below them, Noah felt a deep sense of completion and anticipation. Their fight for justice had evolved into something much larger, a movement that was reshaping how society protected its most vulnerable members. But more than that, it had given them a life filled with purpose and meaning that went far beyond personal success or comfort. Lily fell asleep against his shoulder somewhere over Kansas, her face peaceful and content. In her lap was a folder full of letters from children around the world who'd been inspired by her courage to speak up about their own experiences. Each letter was a testament to the power of one person's bravery to change countless other lives. Looking down at his sleeping daughter, Noah realized that they'd found something precious in the aftermath of their trauma, not just healing and justice, but a calling that would sustain them for the rest of their lives. They'd learned that love, when coupled with courage and persistence, really could change the world. The plane continued its journey through the night sky, carrying them home to a house filled with art projects for the Pen Pal program, research materials for congressional testimony, and the simple everyday evidence of a life well lived in service to others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, and new lives to touch. But tonight, as they flew through the darkness toward the dawn, Noah felt profound gratitude for the strange and painful journey that had led them to this place of purpose and peace. Their story had begun with betrayal and ended with triumph. But more than that, it had shown them that even the worst human cruelty could be transformed into a force for protection and healing. That was the real legacy they were building together. Not just justice for themselves, but hope for everyone who would come after them.